traveling far without a home, but not without a star.
So there you have it, folks. This is a lecture in 10 minutes about United States immigration and trying to cover basically the big concepts and some of the vocabulary that you might see on your exams at the end of the year. So of course, immigration is the migration of people from other countries to the United States. And throughout American history, the federal government has been delegated with the power to kind of control immigration policy. But we're going to take you through the political and some of the social aspects of immigration as well. First things first, you want to make sure that you understand the difference between old immigration, and this would be immigration from Northern Europe, England, the Scandinavia, Norway. This is the first basic wave of immigration. And you'll see in a chart that I'm probably going to throw up behind me maybe now, that early on immigrants basically came from those areas. They came for a variety of reasons, religious reasons, political reasons, but at the backbone of most immigration is economic reasons. People came looking for work, looking for the opportunity to do better than the countries that they came from. So that's kind of called old immigration. And that's roughly the turn of the century, 1790s, 1800, 1810, 1820. But even during this period, 1840, I guess, is what we'll stretch it to, when the Irish came kind of to the United States in bigger droves because of the potato famine over in Ireland. Nativism is a word that you're going to become familiar with. And there were, places where no Irish need apply. And if it was, you were Irish, or especially if you were Chinese, we'll talk about that later, you would find it hard to assimilate into American culture. So nativism is a word. Xenophobic is also a word that you should get to know, fear of foreigners. But let's jump to the other side and let's see about new immigration. So old immigration, early immigration, Northern Europe, the Pilgrims, Scandinavia, Denmark, Norway, England, that kind of thing there. So let's go, right? Yeah, hey guys. So this is new immigration. And new immigration doesn't refer to very new immigration, like in the recent maybe 20 or 30 years, but this refers to immigration from kind of Eastern Europe. And if you look at that map of Europe, you can see that we've already kind of highlighted the idea of England and Northern Europe. And now we're going to see during the Industrial Age, the 1845s, 1850s, 1860s, we're going to have an influx of immigrants from these types of countries. Italy. And of course, if you're from Italy, you don't speak English. Spain and Germany and a little bit of with Poland and these types of countries immigrated during the Industrial Age. And more nativism, as we find our immigration policy follows a pattern of kind of people becoming more diversified. We go from Northern Europe to Southern Europe to Eastern Europe to Asia to Latin America, and the nativism is going to get kind of increased. Nativism being this kind of backlash against immigrants, sometimes based on economic, I want my job, I don't want immigrants taking it, sometimes based on racism, pure and out racism, like the Japanese American experience at World War II, or Chinese Americans, that came to build the railroad. There's lots of examples of nativism and xenophobia. If we go back to, I'm going to turn for a second, to the idea of nativism early on. In the 1840s, there was a political party called the Know-Nothings that had a platform of anti-immigration. But that's always been with us. It's with us today. It was with us then. And I'm not here to say we should have more immigration or less immigration, but that's definitely been kind of a force in American history. Those who believe in more immigration and those people who believe that we should build walls and we should isolate ourselves. And that's that. So let's move on. Let's talk about some other concepts. We want to make sure that we identify, like we said before, that old immigration, new immigration, and we also want to make sure that we understand the idea that new immigration, this period of immigration in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, is directly linked to industrialization. There's definitely a big business aspect to immigration. We're going to talk about the current situation with immigration today, but then, now, and always, big business has been in favor of immigration because this represents a stream of cheap labor, people that will work for less than maybe somebody who's accustomed to a middle class lifestyle or who wants to, make X amount rather than minimum wage or less. So that's another force to be reckoned with. We have, the idea of big business and the idea of pluralism and diversity, the idea of nativism and xenophobia, and these kind of ebbs and flows have always been with us in American history. Now let's turn our attention, if I can walk off camera for a second and get ready, to the period of nativism in public policy through the political process in the 1920s. So let's go see if I can't find something out about that for you. So, open immigration, right? Old immigration, new immigration, all the way into the 20th century. And then the United States in 1916, 1915 enters World War I. And following that episode, we find out Woodrow Wilson and the Treaty of Versailles gets rejected, and the United States retreats to isolationism. And this is directly going to impact our immigration policy. So get ready for 3 laws in the 1920s that are nativistic and relatable to some major themes in American history. So I better put them on the wall here. You ready? The first one is the 1921 National Quotas Act. And the Quotas Act set immigration numbers at around 350,000. We put the walls up because we didn't want World War I, Europeans and the violence spreading and coming here. It's also relatable to the Russian Revolution, which occurred in 1917. And there's a fear, a red scare of communism and socialism and anarchism. And in 1924, the next law, we find we have the National Origins Act. What does origins mean? Where are you from, boy? Right? The Origins Act actually favored Europeans that were coming from Northern Europe, but if you were anywhere close to Russia, we were going to shut that wall up. And even in 1929, they passed a second National Origins Act, which lowered the quota or the immigration numbers to about 150,000. So the 1920s is, the decade of laissez-faire, the roaring 20s. I want you to tag as nativism and make sure you get the Quota Act and the National Origins Act, and that you can talk a little bit about how that's related to World War I and the Red Scare. So we move on. Here we go. All right. We have 2 more to do, and we better be quick. Mr. Hughes loses track of his 10 minutes YouTube time. The Immigration Act of 1965 is going to open those doors up from the closed door situation. This is Lyndon Johnson, part of the Great Society, and basically they changed the immigration laws to raise the numbers and let more people in. And this is basically countries like Latin American countries and Asia, Southeast Asia, basically kind of, diversifying in a sense. We also allowed for political oppression to be a reason, once again, which allowed more types of people to come here from different places in the world. So 1965, we go back to open immigration, the Immigration Act of, say it with me, 1965. All right, the last one, guys, the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, Ronald Reagan. A large problem that America has is illegal immigrants. We're in the tens of millions of illegal immigrants that have come to the United States, and they're not supposed to be here, and they're undocumented. And that poses a number of challenges. So in the 1980s, one way they tried to deal with that is in 1986 with the Immigration Reform and Control Act, is they got a little tougher on border control, at least they were supposed to. And in return for that, and kind of shutting the doors down a little bit, they granted amnesty to anybody who was here longer than, I think it was 15 years or something. And that was supposed to solve the illegal immigration problem. Of course, that hasn't happened, and we still have many illegal immigrants here, and many Americans feel as though they should be thrown out. I don't know how you do that, throw out 13 million people. And many Americans believe they should be granted amnesty and given a chance. And we have the border problem, and violence, and drugs, and gangs, and unfortunately, most immigrants that are here aren't drug lords or gang thieves, or they're here to build a better life for themselves. Not unlike the Puritans, not unlike the Chinese, not unlike the Irish, not unlike any group in American history. So just keep your head screwed on tight when you're talking about immigration, and get your major laws and your major strokes of American history down. So right now, what's the last thing we can say? Arizona has passed their own law trying to deal with immigration that the federal government finds violates the 14th Amendment. We can't get into that. That's a reserve power, delegated power struggle. That's for another lecture. Bye!